I'm delighted to be joined by Jack Oclee-Brown, Head of Research and Development at KEF International. Hi, Jack. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Nice to be here.
Great. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about your role at KEF and what that role entails.
Oh, yeah. Well, I lead the R&D team, research and development team, based in Maidstone, and we're the team responsible for making sure KEF products sound well. They live up to the brand. Let's say they sound suitably good. So we develop all of the driver technology, and these days we develop a lot of the DSP algorithms that go into the active speakers as well, and crossovers and anything that affects the sound of the speaker. That would come down to our responsibility to make sure it works correctly.
And you were actively involved in the design of presumably the original LS50s and then the LS50 Wireless IIs?
I mean, I've been at KEF for 15 years
Wow.
permanently.
Okay.
So, and during that time, I've been very much involved with the driver developments through that whole period, and then these days involved with pretty much all aspects. But yeah, for the first generation of LS50, I did the driver. Well, actually, I did a majority of the driver development, but there was a little bit extra that were put in by some other people. I did the passive crossover balance on the LS50 and the DSP settings. Again, it's kind of a team effort. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on. But yes, I was involved with all of those.
And you head up the design and development team. How many of you are there working together?
In Maidstone, in the department, there's around about 11 of us, different specialities in the team. So acoustics, obviously software these days, as well as other types of engineering like mechanical engineering and electronics too.
The original LS50s, the LS50 Wireless, were designed and launched back in 2016. When did you decide to create the Wireless 2 version, and how long did that design and development take?
The development program was quite extended. The major change from an engineering perspective, well, we've got acoustic changes, but the electronics platform change, that's the part that takes quite a long time because you're developing a brand new infrastructure. So it was around about 3 years of development work for that new platform. So we can talk in a minute about the changes compared to the version 1, but it's completely different platform there. So it has a completely different way of streaming audio, a different set of chips in it, and a different set of apps to control it. So that was probably the longest development time. The acoustic side, in a way, was shorter, but it depends how you look at it, because a key feature of LS50 is the UniQ, and we have more or less a continuous development program on UniQ technology. So although the actual driver that's in the LS50 is probably around about 2 year, 18-month development, the reason that can be quicker is because we pull out features from our development program, from our technology development program.
I think you're on the 12th version now of the UniQ.
Yeah, I mean, there's been I would have thought now probably hundreds of different UniQs over the history of KEF. So you can't count everyone as a new generation. So we try and say, if there's a specific technology update that gives a step change in performance, we say, well, that's a new generation. And yeah, and so it's the 12th generation is the kind of latest UniQ. And I think in the old LS50 it was a 11th. So yeah, that brings a lot of extra performance as well. We're getting the latest technology into UniQ.
What was it that you set out to improve with the LS50 Mark II?
With the wireless in particular, I
Yeah, with
think
what?
the big push behind the project was to update connectivity. The LS50W is kind of one of the first products we've made with streaming in, and to date it was the most ambitious one, so it had lots of connectivity to different apps and so on, and well received. But we also received criticism from the market that people would like it to do different things, different service support, or different types of connectivity. And the rate of development of streaming services and different streaming connectivities like AirPlay 2 and Google Chrome really developed quite a lot since 2016. So the big push for us was to change that platform, offer a more versatile system for the user. From a performance perspective, it was kind of a little bit of a tricky decision for us what to do, because the LS50, especially the passive, but also the wireless, is quite a classic product, and people do really like what it does. So we did have this worry that we were messing with a classic, messing with something that was revered by people, that people really loved. So we were a little bit hesitant, but in the end, we decided the best approach was to kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. Just say, well, we've done a lot since 2016 in our acoustic technology, so let's put in everything we can and bring it up right up to date with the best possible performance we can achieve.
And I know the cabinet shape and design and look of the speakers is very similar, but there are quite a lot of new features in there, aren't there?
Yeah, the key was to really try and identify areas where we could make big performance improvements, but we don't want to make so many changes that it becomes a different speaker, because clearly it's something that a lot of people have enjoyed owning and they do like the sound. The cabinet, and particularly the baffle and the way the driver's mounted in it, is kind of iconic for that product, and it was something that was very, very carefully designed the first time round. So we had some discussion and some simulation work on improving that, and we more or less quite quickly decided that was a hiding to nothing. We could make improvements only by making pretty radical changes to the cabinet, which would then make it look very, very different from the original. So instead of that, we looked at parts where we could make a really big performance increase. So we'd already mentioned new driver with the latest technology in, and then updates on the streaming and the electronics as well.
The biggest word that seems to have been bandied around about them is the word meta. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about exactly what meta is in terms of the speaker design.
It's interesting because the new driver has a lot of updates besides the meta material, and all of these contribute to the increased performance. So a new motor system, it's a new feature such as the tweeter gap damp, improvements to the break off the mid-range cone, all of these. But of course, the feature that's caught everyone's attentions, and probably quite rightly so, is the way we've used a new absorber for the sound that comes off the back of the tweeter. So conventionally, the sound that comes off the back of the tweeter can be quite problematic, and you have to kind of choose a strategy with that. You either make a very small chamber behind the tweeter, so you don't really have to absorb it, but in that case you can get quite a lot of distortion caused by this little pocket of air with very high fluctuating pressures. So much better strategy is you have some kind of vent and try and capture that sound gently. And that's not news. There's quite a few other manufacturers who take that approach, and normally what you do is you have a long tube of some kind and you progressively absorb that sound using wadding. Now, you're at the mercy of wadding in that case, and the way wadding absorbs sound is by turning it into heat as the sound wave moves through kind of little pores in a piece of foam. And that physical mechanism of absorption is a little bit restrictive, and if you want to absorb the sound really effectively, particularly at the bottom of the tweeter's range, which is where our is really sensitive, you end up needing to have a lot of foam and a really long tube. So what you have to do is you have to compromise. You make the tube really shorter than it needs to be to perfectly absorb that sound. And And we've been doing it like that for many years, and so have many other manufacturers. But we've recently seen a lot of interesting chatter on at universities and at conferences about a different way to absorb sound, where rather than finding a porous material that naturally absorbs sound, you create a structure, and you create the structure in a way that it absorbs sound. So, I mean, you've got a blank piece of paper, so you have to come up with some kind of structure that absorbs sound, and it's up to us how well we can create that to do the job. And this area of research is called metamaterials, which kind of comes from the Greek word beyond, meta, beyond material. So it's the idea that if you take this approach, then you can get something that works better than natural materials. So it has captured people's attention, and it does mean that we can get quite a step forward in performance compared to conventional approaches. So visually, what is it? Well, at the back of the tweeter, we have a molded structure which is rigid, but it's kind of combination of 30 folded up rigid channels, very small channels, and they all work together to absorb the sound over the tweeter's bandwidth. And by taking this approach, we can absorb much more of the sound, particularly in that critical lower region of the tweeter.
So the LS50 Meta passive speakers and the LS50 Wireless II wireless streaming loudspeakers. The LS50 Wireless have got built-in amps and DACs and streaming. What would you say the advantages of an active speaker over a passive speaker?
From a engineering perspective, there's quite a big difference in how we can design the signal that actually reaches the driver. So in a passive speaker, we have to use electronic components that are unpowered. So there's no power supply in a passive speaker. So all we can do is we can remove energy from the signal that comes from the amplifier. So for the tweeter, we remove the low frequency energy, and for the woofer, we remove the high frequency energy. So we're always discarding the signal that we don't want. It means we're restricted in how well we can define what gets to the drivers. In an active speaker, we're doing everything in DSP, so digital signal processing. So effectively, the signal comes in digitally, and then we can process it digitally and then send it out through the amplifier to the driver. And the amount of control we have then over the signal that we deliver to the actual drivers is on a completely different planet, way more control. So from my perspective, I have a lot more options when we're balancing this, and when the team are tweaking the DSP, we can have very fine control. So that inherently gives a little bit of an advantage to the active system in terms of performance.
So is the driver the same in the LS50 Meta as in the wireless version?
Yes, the driver's exactly the same in both versions. So it is interesting, if you have the chance to listen to both, you can really hear the benefits of the two different types of approach.
From a design perspective, once you've got the driver designed and the way it sounds in the LS50 Meta, you can go on to improve the way that sounds by the balancing and what you do with the amplification and the DACs in the wireless version.
Yes, so with the that is actually the order we did things. So we did the Meta first, and when we're doing the Meta, we have to be conscious that different customers are going to have different amplifiers. So we have less control over the end user's experience of the product. So when we listen, we do it on a range of equipment, and we also, we have to set one balance that's going to try and work in lots of different situations. And then when we come to do the wireless, suddenly these constraints have gone. So we know exactly the amplifiers that are going to be used. So we don't have to second guess anything there. And we can also optimize those amplifiers to work with the driver they're connected to. So we don't have to have the same amplifier for the tweeter and the woofer. And then finally, we can also, you've probably seen this, we can build in some user controls in the wireless version so that if the customer hasn't got the perfect listening room, or they're not able to put the speakers in the perfect place, we can offer them some little tweaks just to make their experience that bit better. And that's also quite significant for some customers, comparing the passive and the active versions.
I think you've upgraded the amplification in the Wireless 2 speakers over the original ones, and you've got Class D for the mid bass driver and Class AB for the tweeter. Why did you choose to have the different classes within the amplification side?
That's a good question. So this mix is something we had on the Mark 1 as well. So the Class D on the midwoofer and the Class AB on the tweeter. But both of those amplifiers have been upgraded. And the reason we choose different classes is because the signal that we're reproducing for the two drivers is very different. So with the midwoofer, we have a lot more power being delivered into that driver. And so we want something where in the very compact speaker, we can get quite a lot of power. So it's a 250, I think it's spec'd at, watts on the midwoofer.
280.
280, sorry. And doing that in Class AB would generate way too much heat. So would be completely compromising the whole design. We'd have a whole huge heat sink. But Class D doesn't have that problem, can run extremely cool. It can be very, very compact. On the other hand, one of Class D's caveats is that it is a little bit restricted in bandwidth because it uses switching to operate. So for the high frequency where we don't need such high powers, we can choose a different style of amplifier, an AB, which delivers a much wider bandwidth. And it's not as efficient, so it generates more heat than a Class D would, but we're not running it very hard on the tweeter. So that's quite a good example of how when you go to an active system, you get options that you just can't choose with a passive system. And yeah, we've tried to select a recipe that gives us the best possible performance from the product.
And in terms of the way they sound, the original LS50 Wireless, it was a very transparent and clean sound and had a good sound stage. But the LS50 Wireless II seems to be an easier listen.
Well, I think part of that difference you're hearing is the driver. So the things that changed between the 2016 UniQs and the recent ones is kind of a little bit of a list, but everything we've done is to try and reduce coloration in the driver. And there was a couple of key changes where when we made them, we felt that the sound had become kind of truer, a bit more relaxed. So maintaining the same kind of transparency, but just easier to hear through into what's going on in the background. The tweeter gap damper is very key to that, and the metamaterial as well, so that the tweeter is really unstrained. So that's definitely part of it. On the digital signal processing side, we've redone our signal flow in the DSP, and I think we made really big improvements to the way that we protect the driver. So one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is in a DSP speaker, we can have other things there to make sure that you never damage your speaker. So it's a bit like ABS. So you're driving a car, most of the time the ABS is doing nothing. But if you need it, it can step in there and prevent you from going off the road. So we have similar kind of systems in the DSP where we monitor what's going on, and if you accidentally turn it to maximum VAT, or more likely your 2-year-old does, then we can step in and we can make sure we don't damage anything. But those systems are a challenge to design because we want to monitor things without treading on the signal when we don't need to. I think we made a big improvement in how that works. So particularly when you're listening to the speaker quite loud and the systems are just kind of going, do I have to do anything or not? They sound a lot better on the new version. So,
yeah, I think they sound a lot warmer.
Yeah. So I mean, that's, I think, a key for the KEF sound is we've always tried to make speakers where you can enjoy them for your whole evening. It's not a quick 10-minute listen and then that's too much. I've had enough of that. It's something you can settle in and really enjoy over a long period.
And the new speakers will handle up to DSD 256 and they're downsampling to 192.24 or 96.24, depending on the connectivity.
Yeah, exactly. So the DSP that calculates the signals to go to the drivers. So that's got the crossover in, the user EQs. There's one in each speaker, and that runs at a fixed rate. So either 192 when you've got the cable between the speakers, or 96. So everything that comes into the speakers, we have to transcode. We have to change to 192.24. The new streaming front end can handle DSD, as you said, up to 256, and in fact PCM up to 384 as well. So that new piece of technology in the speakers actually goes to these kind of really rarefied sample rates. So we want to offer that connectivity to people, but the DSP is running at 192.24.
One of the benefits now is that with the original LS50 wireless, you had to have a cable between the two of them. Now you don't; they're completely wireless, other than mains cables. But you can run them now 96.24 without an Ethernet cable between the two. And if you want to go up to 192.24, you can just connect them with an Ethernet cable and get the higher resolution. So I think that's a big step forward.
We did get the feedback straight away as soon as we did the LSX system, and we built in the 4824 wireless connection between the two speakers. That was a clear piece of feedback, people saying we'd love to have this on the LS50. And the reason we didn't do it on the original was because we were really trying to be totally uncompromising about the sound quality on the LS50. So at the time, we couldn't find a wireless technology that we felt was good enough to do that. I mean, the key thing with doing wireless between left and right is really about synchronization. So it's not quite the same as streaming stereo to one box. When you stream it to two boxes, you have to make sure they're perfectly in sync, or you destroy the soundstage. So it wasn't something where there were technologies we considered for the first one, but it was not really until we did the second one we had a technology we thought, actually, this is now so good that we should offer this. But yeah, we still know that some of our customers will have recordings at higher than 96 and they'll want to be able to enjoy them. So we have the cable mode still there for those customers.
The way the speakers work is completely different now to the original version. I think all of the main operation work is no longer done in the app, it's done in the speakers itself. So for example, we've just had Tidal Connect launch, which means that everything's going on from within inside the speaker rather than it being controlled, or the control over the speaker being within the app itself. When I tried it, it seemed to work a lot more quickly, and it gave a much better sort of feeling to the way the connectivity was working with the app.
Yeah, there's a big difference there. Firstly, the streaming platform is a lot more powerful. So the chip that's built into the primary speaker that talks to devices on your network or receives data from the internet is a lot more powerful. So that leads to this snappier experience anyway. But there is a kind of change in emphasis, I would say. So with the Mark 1, the way that we had support for things like Tidal or Cobuzz was to build them into our app. So our users were forced to use our app. The landscape's really, I think, changed quite a lot. Spotify have had their Spotify Connect for a while, but we also saw since 2016 that Google Cast just became way more prevalent, and apps were being updated left, right, and center to have the little Cast logo, and people getting used to the experience of using the native apps for Amazon or for Tidal, getting used to the user experience of using that. Then to go to our version of it can be, very confusing for them because we have to, lay out things slightly differently. So a similar story with AirPlay, really, as well. That since 2016, AirPlay's just taken off as well. So you find a lot more support for it as well. So rather than saying you have to use our app, this time our approach is saying, well, our app is there. We do provide a Tidal implementation, Amazon implementation, Cobuzz implementation, and by the way, I think they're really improved since since the Mark One as well. But that's not the only way you can use the product. You can in fact use the product and never ever download our app. So they can just be a AirPlay speaker for you if you want, or just a Google Chrome speaker if you want, or Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect. That doesn't require you to use our app. So the landscape's just changed, and I do think no matter how well we implement a Tidal within our app, or Amazon within our app, the user experience isn't going to be the same as Tidal, who that's a major part of their operation, is making sure their app's really great and gives you good suggestions. So it's just win-win for us to implement both ways, and Tidal Connect's a good step forwards, because one of Tidal's very key selling features is the Tidal Masters and the MQA support, and Tidal Connect supports that. Tidal app, when you used to be able to use Chromecast, didn't support that. So I think that's really, really great, and I think we'll see more of this maybe in the future, with other services developing their own way to connect to devices.
You mentioned about MQA. So if I've got a Tidal account and I want to play some MQA master files, the speakers will handle those. Do they do the final unfold, or
the LS50 fully supports MQA? So find an MQA track on Tidal, play it, and the LS50 W2 will do everything.
So in terms of future-proofing the speakers, does that mean if there's another major music service that's launched, that's something that can be built into the speakers and then put into the software through a firmware upgrade?
Yes, and that's another big emphasis of the new platform. Is even on the Mark One platform, we introduced new services in different regions as well. But the Mark II is a lot easier for us to update. So there's no action required from the user. So the speakers will update their firmware automatically, normally late at night, so that it's not inconveniencing you, and so will the app. So if a new player comes along, or say if Amazon implement a new feature with higher resolution or something like that, we can roll it out seamlessly to people. And there's something we haven't mentioned yet as well. Another piece of feedback we had very clearly from the Mark One was radio and podcasts. Because it's very, very easy to think of hi-fi systems always being used for something like Tidal or Cobuzz for critical listening. But people have one audio system and they use it. Yes, they use it for critical listening, but they always also like to use it for the radio in the morning when they're making their tea, or the podcast, the spoken word podcast they love. So
do they make tea as well, or?
Maybe in the future. I can't do that with a firmware update, but so we focused on the kind of peripheral use as well, because we see that a lot of people who want this kind of hi-fi system, they want it to do all of their audio in the whole house, so TV, sound, podcast, radio. So that's also something where there've been quite a lot of work and big improvements too.
And you've built an awful lot into the speakers in terms of the connectivity, the way they sound, for what's considered really to be a very reasonable price. I think $2,250 for the speakers and £400 for the stands. For just over £2,500, you've got a really good hi-fi system that pretty well does everything.
Yes, yeah, that's more or less a challenge we set ourselves, because we're very used to, as I say, being uncompromising about audio. That's really what KEF are all about. But with a product like this, where people who maybe they're hi-fi enthusiasts who are buying some of them, but there's also going to be people who buy them just because they want something better than the Bluetooth speaker they've had or the AirPlay speaker they've had. And it's quite tricky to say to those people, okay, well, these sound a lot better, but all those convenient features that you got used to, like radio and podcasts, they're not there anymore. So we didn't really want to make people have to make that choice. So yes, it's been quite a broad improvement to try and cover all use cases as far as we can.
I think we should really just touch on connectivity as well, in terms of you've introduced HDMI ARC within the speakers, so now you can connect your speakers direct to your television, and you can have quality television sound, which I think is really important, because a lot of the TVs these days, whilst they've got sound built in, it's not great sound. And with the ARC feature, you can turn the volume of the LS50s up and down on your television remote control as well. So I think that's quite an important upgrade too.
It's something as well, falls into this kind of category we just talked about, where from a performance perspective, you think, well, does that matter much? But it's really, as soon as you use the speakers, I mean, the wireless Mark 1, you can connect to a TV with an optical connection. But the experience of using ARC is totally different, because if you have the HDMI CEC turned on the television, when you turn on the TV, the speaker comes on. When you turn off the speaker turns off. And if you've bought these speakers as something that you're going to put on the family television, they better be easy to use, because you'll get complaints otherwise. So just that bit of convenience, and also using the TV remote to change the volume, transforms it from something which is potentially quite niche to something which can be quite easily used by most people. So it is important. And yeah, I think we kind of recognize from our user feedback on the Mark 1 that people buy these as kind of the audio system for the house. They put them on their TV for their TV sound. They stream to them. They want easy Bluetooth connectivity. They want it to do. I've used this phrase a few times, and it's like the Swiss Army knife of audio. You try and make it possible to get them to replay from any source, or any way that someone wants to use them.
And for those people that like me use Roon, they'll work in a multi-room situation. You can go to a particular zone. When you select that zone, the speakers will automatically turn themselves on. You can stream music to them, and then when you've finished, you can either turn the speakers off, or they'll go off automatically after a period of time if you've sat there and they've been so easy to listen to that you're just falling asleep. So I mean, from that point of view, they're a lot better than the original ones that you didn't have that control over.
Yes, that's right. And so Roon is one way to do that. You can also put them into zones with other Chrome audio speakers or AirPlay speakers too, and you get similar kind of benefits. The zone comes on and goes off once you've stopped using it.
I know you're not going to tell me what the next product is in the pipeline, because I think lots of people have asked you that and they've all got the same answer. But I guess the question I'm going to ask is, because of the success that KEF's had with the LSX, the original LS50s and the new LS50 Wireless II, presumably you're going to continue to develop the active side of and streaming with your loudspeakers.
Yes, that's a good summary. KEF is fundamentally a loudspeaker company, and our core is to produce great sounding products, and that it means we'll continue to develop speakers for the traditional hi-fi guys who want passive speakers, but active is a way that we can also widen the appeal to people who want a simpler system with more convenience. And the investment you can see in the LS50 W2 into the streaming system, into the improved apps, is a good foundation for us in that part of the market.
Jack, thank you ever so much for joining me today, and I wish you well with the development of the next set of speakers that you decide to bring out, which hopefully won't be too far away. But in the meantime, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Pleasure to speak to you.
Cheers. If you'd like any information about the products we've discussed this evening, please take a look at our website, ultimate-stream.live. If you'd like a demonstration, please do get in touch. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.